back to me, 22. Come on back to me. Come on back. Come on, 22, 22, 22. Come on back. Come on back. 22. Come on. Come on. Come on. 22.
What are you doing? What's
22.
the matter with you?
Not now. Not now. Just go away. Not now. Come
How long
on,
have you been
22.
down?
Root for me. We're going for 22. 22. 22.
12.
22.
How much was that? How much money is that?
All right. One more time. 22.
Why are you
Big
betting
chip,
22?
22. Big
We
chip,
gotta talk.
22. Come on back to me, 22. Just come on back.
She's been here all night. She's not on a lucky streak. I think you should talk to her.
How much has she lost?
Talk to her.
How much?
Talk.
Come on back. Come on.
The man says you're not on a lucky
What man?
Right over here, he says you've lost.
I was
How much
down earlier, but come on.
And you're up now?
No, I'm still down, but I'm going to hit now.
How down are you?
David, you're going to bring me bad luck now.
Well,
Stop
he says
it.
you've
Come on.
already got bad
22,
luck.
22. Come on. 22.
22.
Whoa!
All right, I'm sorry, all right. How much?
$35.
We're up, we're up.
No, we're still down.
How down?
Down.
How
22 down. 22.
How down is she?
Down.
Come on, 22.
How down are you?
Down.
How much
down.
have you lost?
Everything.
What does that mean?
Everything.
No, what do you mean?
Everything
What do you
on
mean? What is
22
everything?
and
What are
make
you
it
doing?
happen for me.
Why the
22,
hell are you betting
22.
all that on one number?
Come
Where did you get
back
that number?
to me,
What is 22?
Come on back.
Stop betting
Come on
22.
back.
00.
You lost. It's gone.
22.
What do you mean?
22. 2.
You have no more money.
Two.
Stop.
22.
There's no more money there. Stop it.
22.
Really like 22. Stop it. Come here.
22. 2. I'm gonna hit on 22.
Never know how much I love you. Never know how much I care. When you put your arms around me, I get a fever that's so hard to bear. You give me fever when you kiss me, fever when you hold me tight, fever in the morning, fever all through the night. Oye, buddy, nada más quiero decirte que no se debe hacer eso. It's not nice. ¿Entiendes? Mírame a mí cuando te hable. Este es mi número. Y si tú me fastidias más, te voy a dar una garnata que te va a dejar bobo. Cool it. Sun lights up the morning, moon lights up the night. I light up when you call my name, 'cause you know I'm gonna treat you right. You give me fever when you kiss me. Fever when you hold me tight. All through the night.
My kind of woman!
This is Alex Saltz, and you are listening to That Twilighty Show about that zone. And tonight we're going to talk about 2 episodes, The Fever and The Last Flight.
Welcome to That Twilighty Show about that zone. I'm David Lawler, and I just basically had my friend Alex over here for dinner, where we had some stuffed salmon. I guess it was pretty good. Did you like it?
That was stuffed salmon?
That was stuffed salmon. Yeah,
that
it
was
was
stuffed chicken.
Yeah, no. Salmon.
It was
cracking.
actually...
And it was quite good, even though I didn't really prepare it myself. I just kind of shoved it in the oven with some herbs there. But I put him to work because when I have people over dinner, I put them to work on my podcast. Apparently, I did that with my father-in-law, and I did that with Mr. Colin Hall. who did 4 episodes for me. Tonight we're doing these 2. The Fever and the Last Fright. Okay. Now I have to admit to you and to the audience out there, I had a gambling problem.
In real life?
In real life. The problem lasted precisely 15 minutes.
At what age was this?
This was a while back. I was suckered into a strange storefront, and when I left, I was out $100. It's kind of a con game where they make you think you've won. They give you a big amount of money. Now my wife is feeding the cats, and I'm pretty sure that got...
We have a lot of sound effects tonight.
So it's more than you initially invested to gamble, and then I think I was up $200, and then in the very next toss of the dice, it was a weird kind of a... It kind of reminded me of bingo and dice at the same time. You roll dice or something. I don't know.
And it was in a store?
It was in a weird store that wasn't selling anything.
Where? Where was this again?
It was down in it was like the East Village. I want to say it was the East Village. So in the very next toss of the dice, I was down, really down like Julie Haggerty's character in this Albert Brooks movie called Lost in America, where she lost an entire nest egg because she had a gambling problem. So that's a clip that precedes this episode when it finally goes to air, when it's edited. So inexplicably, the government is attempting to crack down on fantasy sports games by calling it out as being a form of gambling. Meanwhile, just about every state in this fading union, including New York, condones and regulates gambling, as long as they get a nice cut of it. Mm-hmm. But that's neither here nor there. We have The Fever, which premiered January 29th, 1960, written by Rod Serling, directed by Robert Florey.
Mr. and Mrs. Franklin Gibbs, 3 days and 2 nights, all expenses paid, at a Las Vegas hotel. Won by virtue of Mrs. Gibbs's knack with a phrase. But unbeknownst to either Mr. or Mrs. Gibbs is the fact that there's a prize in their package neither expected nor bargained for. In just a moment, one of them will succumb to an illness worse than any virus can produce. A most inoperative, deadly, life-shattering affliction known as the fever.
So basically the story goes like this. Franklin and his wife Flora go to Las Vegas because she won a slogan contest or something. He detests gambling. It's like the devil's sport or something like that. But his wife is excited about their vacation. She wants to have a good time. So Franklin is given a coin by a drunk man at a casino. It makes Franklin use it in a slot machine. He wins and tells his wife that they should keep the winnings and not lose it back like the other people do. As they depart, Franklin believes he hears the slot machine calling his name, which it actually does. You can hear it on the soundtrack. Yes, he has. Anyway, you hear this voice. It sounds like Franklin. And
no, it's more like
Franklin. There you go, with coins. With coins. So he continues to hear this as he tries to sleep. As he imagines his winnings piling up, he decides to try his luck. Telling his wife he can't keep tainted money. He calls it tainted money. And that he's going to get rid of it by putting it back in the machine. Later, Flora goes to the casino, finds him playing the machine obsessively. This is like the middle of the night. He's addicted. Franklin has lost a great deal of their money, and when Flora tries to coax him to stop, Franklin declares that he has lost so much that he has to try and win some of it back, because that's how gamblers think. He becomes enraged when she presses for him to leave, declaring that the machine is inhuman, that it leases you, sucks you in.
Don't you think you ought to stop now?
How can I stop? I've lost a great deal of money. You said it yourself. I've got to win it back.
Well, what if you don't? What if you don't win it back, Franklin? You've been standing here nearly 3 hours.
Yes, I know that, too.
Franklin, dear, you know how awful you feel in the morning after you've been up too late at night.
Flora, will you kindly shut your mouth? I hate a shrew, Flora. I hate a woman who stands in back of you and sees to it that you have miserable luck. And that's what you're doing to me now, Flora. You're giving me miserable luck. Now, please, go away and leave me alone.
Please, people are listening.
The devil with people. I'm not concerned with people. I'm concerned with this machine. It's inhuman. The way it lets you win a little and then takes it all back. It teases you. It holds out promises and wheedles you. It sucks you in and then...
Others observe that he has been playing the machine for hours, and they pretty much get the idea that he's a career gambler, completely addicted to what he's doing. So, first off, had you ever done any gambling?
Yes, I'll tell you a story. But before I do, actually, yeah, I'll save my question for you about this episode later. I've gone to Atlantic City maybe 2 or 3 times. I think twice with like family, friends, and maybe I spent $20. But then,
so you actually went to a town where it's designated that you gamble. You're
yeah,
go there,
just
like Las Vegas.
Yeah, just to have some fun. And then I also went in. This was in 2006, and someone I was seeing, this woman said, "Hey, Alex, let's go to Atlantic City for the weekend." I'm like, oh, Atlantic City, come on! It's like, it's depressing. I don't really find it appealing. She said,
what time of year was this?
It was
winter?
definitely cold because I remember walking on the beach. It was chilly. I think it was around November or maybe even early December. I want to say November.
Right, so really not the time that you would go. Because I've been to Jersey, I've been to those areas where there's a lot of gambling, but usually in the summertime where it's like a really fun beach environment, maybe go to a nice restaurant after, but you didn't really think about gambling. So you're not one of these people who gets on a bus in November or December going there just specifically to gamble.
No. But I really kind of had a little bit of fun. I have to say it was fun, but I lost about $300. And it was stupid. Like, I just kind of said, who cares?
For
so
some
I
reason,
kept
you made
pouring
me feel
money
better
into.
You lost way more money than I did.
Yeah. And there was one game called There was one game which really ate away all of our money. It was called Wheel of Fortune. And it was like one of those slot type of things. So
was it like a thing that was like a kind of like associated with the TV show?
Yeah.
Oh.
But I called it the Wheel of Misfortune.
Yes.
I think, of course, and it started out like we were like ahead. But, you know, I actually lost out of my own money.
That's the only reason you continue, though, is because you feel like you're ahead. You feel like it becomes like this. It's a random thing. So when it's random, you're thinking the next turn, I will double my money. I will triple it. I will quadruple it. And that's sort of the trap in which gamblers fall.
You know, something happened with the same woman. We were in. She actually left to go to move to Hong Kong for work, and I went there with her for a couple of weeks. And we went to Macau. Macau is outside. It's in the South China Sea, outside of Hong Kong. A ferry ride, pretty an hour away. And it has this jurisdiction, they allow gambling on this island. So a lot of people come over there, especially from the Asia areas.
Yeah.
And she was actually playing one of these card games. And I remember she was ahead. And I kept saying, wow, you're doing well. And she was very locked into working. It was just her and the dealer. And she kept on...
Like Franklin, when his wife comes, right?
Maybe.
His wife comes, and he's like waving her off. He's like, get out of here.
Yeah. And she was very much in this zone. And it's really weird because eventually I said, oh, maybe you should stop now. Take your winnings. You're doing... And she said, Alex, she said, you always continue when you're on a roll. And she got really pissed off at me. And I remember...
Just like Franklin in the episode. He says that.
And I remember we had a really big fight. And the emotions kind of ran high.
Yeah.
And I was very surprised that something like that would have spawned a fight, but it did.
It felt like she was a completely different person.
It was
not the person that you went to the place with. She became a completely different person.
Why don't you say that? Seriously, say that into the mic, little daughter.
Money can change people's attitudes completely.
Words of wisdom from an 8-year-old.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Almost 9. Yeah.
So, if you want to get into the philosophical implications of gambling, I would have to say, as a strict observer now, I'm not one of those people who does it anymore. I've thought about the lottery occasionally, but I don't do it. Gambling appears to be a choice. it's not a disease that so many of these addicts swear that it is because they like to feel that they're subsumed by some kind of illness that somehow dictates what they're going to... It's a psychological thing, and it is a choice. It is ultimately a choice. And this is a big but, though. As a victim myself, as I said, the 15 minutes of my life when I lost $100 gambling grabs you hard by the shoulders. It's like a beast with very long cutting claws, and it gets into your head because as you're gambling, you're not thinking about how much money you've lost. You're only thinking about how much money you're ultimately going to win. That's how the gambler thinks. He thinks if I make the right move, I'll win $1 million, and then all my problems will be over. It's an easy $1 million. This is what gamblers think about.
That's actually right on. I want to ask you, now, in this episode, The Fever, there's a part of the storyline which I'm completely not following. It's sort of like something that doesn't really make sense.
What?
He had his winnings, right?
Right.
And then he said, I'm going to just get rid of this money because it's like tainted money.
Right.
So what made him go beyond getting rid of that money? Because he said, I have to get my money back later on. So in other words, if he only had 10
because what
coins...
that really is, it's more about the addiction than anything else. He has become completely addicted to this machine that he supposedly does not want to be involved with. And then he gets it into his head that this machine is the devil and must therefore be exorcised in some way. So how do you exorcise it? By his logic, by his rationale. It's about getting all your money out of that machine and winning in a big win, or getting all that money that was made from gambling away from you.
But
so
he got... where was that... Where was it... There was no depiction of him going from the stage of just getting rid of the money he had made into him continuing it and going beyond that phase.
Right. Well, they sped up the story a little bit. It's 25-minute running time.
Right.
So
I thought that
they
should have
sped
been...
it up a little bit.
I thought that should have been part of it.
It should be. You find a lot in Twilight Zone episodes when someone undergoes a change, it's done very quickly.
Oh. Sometimes they jump ahead and they just... You kind of have to
very
assume...
much it's like a one-act play in that way. Like, I was talking about an episode with my friend Andrew, the episode Escape Clause, and I was trying to figure out the time between him making a deal with the devil to be immortal and the time when he actually dies, and it's about 2 weeks. So this guy goes through all this struggle to make a deal with the devil to be immortal, only to die 2 weeks later, so he was hardly immortal.
Okay.
So it's speeding up the process of that for dramatic effect, and also because of that smaller running time.
It's funny because as much as when we start talking about the other episode, there's something kind of different that happens as the plot goes along,
right,
which I thought...
Let's
I'll mention later.
So when Franklin puts his last dollar into the machine, bless you, it malfunctions and will not spin. Feeling fiendishly cheated out of his last chance to strike it rich, Franklin begins yelling and attacking the machine to give him back his last dollar. He's taken out of the casino screaming. Later in bed, Franklin tells Flora that the machine was about to pay off, but deliberately broke down. Deliberately, so that it wouldn't have to pay him off. He then hears the machine calling his name. To his horror, he sees the slot machine coming down the hallway towards their room, chasing him. Flora can't see it, of course. She thinks he's out of his mind. He gets into his bed. This thing opens the door, and it says that thing that you can do really well. Franklin! Again, with coins dripping in the background. Great little sound effect. This thing is sentient and has tracked him down. He eventually goes crashing out a window to his death, and I think the slot machine was there too, right?
Yeah, after he died.
So it's like he dragged the slot machine down into hell with him.
Yeah, this has become an extension of his psyche, the slot machine.
Can you imagine, like, the cops and all these onlookers going by to go to the street, and they see a guy fall into his death with a slot machine, strangling...
Well, the slot machine wasn't actually there. The slot machine was there in his imagination.
In his imagination, right. The coins were there, though.
He was hallucinating, right. He had been up for 24 hours. Would you ever go gambling?
No!
How come?
Well, I don't want to just get sucked into something that would just cause me to lose every single piece of money that I have.
Okay, that's very smart.
But
respect.
this isn't a particularly supernatural story. It's more of a catharsis or the personification of fear.
Yes, I would say it's, and what you just said, it's about, and it's about going a little nuts and hallucinating and losing your sense of control. Really, like you just said, it's. I think a lot of people lose control when they gamble.
Absolutely, they do. So, final thoughts about the episode. What did you think of it?
I thought it was okay. It wasn't my favorite episode, but I'm glad I saw it because it was a little. It went along differently from a lot of other Twilight Zones, just because it really didn't involve, in my mind, supernatural. It involved more of someone just, crumbling and breaking down emotionally, and then having
right. It was more about
addiction
being symbolic, and it wasn't necessarily like a Twilight Zone episode per se. It wasn't like a character gets thrust into a weird supernatural situation. It's more that it was just fears. It was what was going on in this person's mind more than anything else. And every gambler in the world will say when they look at that episode, yeah, that's just what it's like.
It was about gambling. It was about being sucked in to gambling and it being an addictive thing.
So now we're moving on to the episode The Last Flight. This was the 18th episode of the first season, written by Richard Matheson and directed by William Claxton. This may be one of, in addition to, I guess, Walking Distance that we did, another episode to feature a time travel theme, but this one comes from more of a mishap, not necessarily from a person who accidentally stumbles. Well, he does accidentally stumble. We know this. Basically, Flight Lieutenant Terry Decker of the British Royal Flying Corps, number 56 Squadron, lands his World War I era Newport biplane.
We have a jumping child behind us.
On an American airbase in France, after flying through a strange cloud, he is immediately taken into custody and questioned by the American base commander, General Harper, and his provost marshal, Major Wilson. So the two men ask Decker if he was trying to make a film or was part of an air show, and Decker's like, what? This is wartime, buddy. And his squadron, he claims that the date is March 5th, 1917. He is then informed that the date is actually March 5th, 1959.
Excuse me, sir. Where exactly am I?
Where exactly did you think you were?
Well, I thought I was landing at 56 Squadron RFC.
56 Squadron RFC? Wasn't that it? What's today's date?
March the 5th.
What year?
1917.
1917?
Yes, that's correct. Well, isn't it?
It's March the 5th, 1959, Lieutenant.
And Decker realizes that he traveled 42 years into the future without a DeLorean, without any other kind of time machine. So, while there were a couple of time travel episodes involving actual time machines, the bulk of the Twilight Zone's time-shifting material was orchestrated from accidents, perhaps devised by providence or haphazardly, as in the case of The Last Flight. And later, episodes like The Trouble with Templeton, which Alex will be reviewing with me later on, much later on, in 2016, after we're all billionaires. Back There and The Odyssey of Flight 33, Static, 100 Yards Over the Rim, and many more. Time travel is the most heavily utilized of all science fiction narratives in the Twilight Zone. It's probably one of the most heavily utilized science fiction narrative of all time. It's always about time travel in the end. Before we continue on, were there any particular time travel episodes, not episodes, but time travel movies or stories that appealed to you?
Oh my gosh, it's actually a subject that I'm fascinated by. Of course, that the old Michael J. Fox movie,
Back to the
Future was fun, and I think there have to have been a lot of other movies that I saw that I really enjoyed that that involved time travel, but I can't remember them except for maybe one of the ones in the 90s with Jodie Foster, Contact.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, and that was, I don't know that I'd call it.
It wasn't much time travel, it was interdimensional travel.
I don't know why, for some reason, she ends up talking to her dad or something.
Right. And what was the new movie that came out last summer, which had Matthew McConaughey and involved time travel?
Matthew McConaughey was in Contact, wasn't
he? He might have been.
He was like her boyfriend or something.
He might have been. But this one was...
He was like, dude, you can't do this, man.
Right.
You can't go back in time, man. What are you doing?
Maybe it was. But he was in the one in the summer where he was an astronaut and he ended up going like into a very dense gravitational field, like in a black hole.
Wait.
Where the time was slowed down.
I think you're thinking of The Martian, right?
No, that's with Matt Damon.
Matthew
McConaughey was in a movie last summer, or this past summer, or maybe this past year.
You thinking about Gravity, or
yeah, I think
the
it
one
was
with George Clooney.
No, not Gravity.
No,
that was George Clooney and Sandra Bullock. Anyway, it will come to me. We'll mention it.
Beer.
So anyway, it's something I'm interested in, but also I'm also interested in real life accounts of interdimensional shifts in time that have happened, including ones that have, allegedly happened over the Bermuda Triangle.
You talking about real people?
Well, there were incidents over the Bermuda Triangle. Famous stories that one of them involved some warplanes that actually disappeared, and
right.
A lot of kind of parascience speculation says that there's some kind of weird thing going on above the triangle where it could involve a lapse of time.
Right.
So that's kind of what this show that we just saw, this episode, reminded me of. Something that might have occurred over the Bermuda Triangle.
Well,
yeah.
It was probably the first episode of the Twilight Zone that really you didn't see it coming, that it was going to be about time travel.
No.
So Decker tells the officers that he and his comrade Alexander Mackay were fighting 7 German aircraft and that Mackay died. He refuses to believe the Americans when they tell him that Mackay is alive and he's become an air vice marshal, a very high rank in the Air Force. Mackay had been a hero during the Second World War, saving thousands of lives, shooting down German bombers. Americans also asked Decker if he knew that Mackay was actually coming to inspect the base that day. Major Wilson tries to help Decker remember what happened. He seems to be the one that kind of gets it. He understands what's going on, even though it's a little bit crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Now, there was a Star Trek Next Generation episode that toyed with the idea of destruction by absence, in that it was a starship which was vital to the particular battle, somehow jumping forward in time and thus avoiding the battle and changing the future by not being destroyed. Mm-hmm. That episode was called Yesterday's Enterprise. It's considered a classic. It's from season 3, I believe. If you're interested in grabbing it, because this Decker character somehow avoided his battle, a man who would become important to the future died. So that's when he comes to the conclusion that he has to go and sacrifice himself to save this guy, because obviously this guy's going to be pivotal in the future.
Mm-hmm. That was an interesting piece of it. And I guess as to get a little deeper into the plot line, they were involved in, I don't know if you just mentioned this, but when they were in that dogfight of sorts with the Germans,
right?
Then the Decker character was certain that he had perished, right? And he was carrying this tremendous guilt around.
Yeah. He kept saying that he was a coward because he ran.
Yeah.
In the, I guess the first timeline or whatever it is, he was a coward. He ran. Mackay dies.
But I thought you said you were fighting 3 German planes yourself, so how
I wasn't fighting anyone. I was running. When the Germans came at us, I left him up there to die.
Well, he didn't die!
Well, I can't understand that.
Well, maybe he got help somehow.
What's the matter?
What you said.
What?
That he got help.
certainly in the realm of possibilities.
See? Maybe it was me that helped him.
Decker, I said when he got help, I meant that somebody else...
Well, there wasn't anyone within 50 miles who could have helped him. Maybe it wasn't an accident that I landed here. Maybe I was brought here for a purpose. To find out that Mac had survived. To find out that time was giving me a second chance. You've got to let me go.
But I can't.
But you've got to, don't you see? It's the only chance I have. It's the only chance he has.
But he's alive. He's coming here today.
How do you know that? How do you know that if I don't get back, he won't be here? How do you know that he won't have been killed 42 years ago unless I help him now?
That's insanity, Decker.
But this does not hold well with the inconsistency that later occurs. While he's talking to while he's talking to the American officers, they are consciously aware that this Mackay person exists, which means he's a big hero, which means he wouldn't be necessarily. In reality, if he had actually vanished and not been a part of that battle and not saved Mackay's life, Mackay wouldn't exist in that way. He wouldn't exist in that form. He would be like, who's this Mackay character you keep talking about? I've never heard of this person. And that would have carried a little bit more dramatic weight. I think it's a small hiccup in the narrative because this person should not exist.
He shouldn't exist.
Okay, the movie you're talking about with Matthew McConaughey was Interstellar. He just showed me on his cell phone.
Yeah. I so rudely interrupted
Thank God
your
for cell
train
phone
of
technology.
thought.
It's good to have it. Interstellar is about an astronaut who travels.
Yeah,
in
did you
time.
see it?
No, I can't.
Anyway, back to this. Let's go back. I just wanted you to know. So
I'll
this
make note of
guilt,
that.
he's guilt-ridden. This is what I didn't understand. At the end, it would have absolved him of his guilt if he had actually seen the
Sorry, I have to sneeze.
Oh,
And
1, 2.
now it's going away, so never mind.
It's okay.
It's going away. But to me, it doesn't make much sense that they would even know who this Mackay person was unless, some kind of sacrifice had been made. And if this person does exist, then it affects that reality right there. That's just sort of a problem I have with the narrative.
There was another that I agree with you about that. Now, there was another movie recently that involved time travel, and I saw it probably about a year ago. I want to say the actor in it was Matt Damon, but I don't think it was.
You thinking about The Martian again?
No. It was an actor who I think the character was supposed to be a male, but then it ended up that they were a female. Does this sound at all familiar to you?
Not really, no.
No. This is another one I'm going to have to figure out the name of, but I think I'm going to have to recall this. I'm going to have to talk about it on a future episode with you, but it was actually really interesting.
An offhand suggestion made by Wilson that perhaps someone else helped him makes Decker realize that he has been given a second chance. He tells the American officer that there was no one within 50 miles who could have come to help Mackay. So if Mackay survived, it had to be because he went back himself. That's when he comes to the conclusion he has to beat the crap out of everybody in that room, get to his airplane, and start her up.
And he throws a good punch.
He apparently does, because the dude is out. He's cold-cocked.
He knocked 3 people out. He knocked out the first 2 people where he was.
He's
and
like, and then run, and then
Then when he got to his airplane, someone was trying to stop him, and he planted one right in his face.
Yeah. How did he do that? Was he on the ground before he hit it, or was he in the airplane when he threw the punch?
He was still on the ground when someone came to kind of stop him.
It's like, hey,
and then
hey, you can't do that. Boom.
Right, and then when he was actually in the plane, another officer came up and held a gun to his head, and he said, "I'll shoot you if you go." And he said,
that was I think that was Wilson who did that.
Yeah, that was Wilson.
It's like, I'd rather die.
He said, "I'd rather die," and then that was kind of him flying.
So he's
back.
like, "Oh, you son of a bitch! You called my bluff."
Yeah.
So he backs away, he gets up, he gets on the plane,
Now-
and he goes into the clouds.
Right. Now, I liked the episode, but I wanted to make a comment. This is going back to what I was saying earlier about the other episode we were just talking about.
Okay.
The, what was the other episode called? The Fever?
The Fever.
Okay. And The Fever, it seemed like there was a lot of jumping around. You know, they actually, in that one instance, they kind of jumped ahead in time without really explaining. Now, in this episode, I thought at one point he went on a very long kind of dialogue thing. And it was really interesting.
There was a lot of dialogue.
Yes, there was a lot of dialogue.
A lot of the more important plot details were revealed in the dialogue in a small little room.
Yep, and I thought, wow, this is so different from television today, where everything is condensed. It's so streamlined. There's no excess.
But everything is like, in today's TV, they have to put everything on the screen.
Do people not have any attention span anymore?
Well,
Is that
I don't
why?
know if it's that. I don't know if it's necessarily that. It might just be television reacting to movies. Because when you go to a movie, you see all this big spectacle on the screen. It's an enormous stimuli, something that affects you on a visceral level. So now television kind of competes with that, like it did back in the days of Twilight Zone, because television always dramatically superior to movies, no matter what, because they always had the time to be able to tell decent stories, whereas movies are kind of one shot and that's it. But movies and TV didn't really, especially in the early 60s, late 50s, this time period was. Television and movies didn't really have that much different. The great thing about TV was you stay home, you watch, and you look into a little box, whereas movies are bigger screens and it's kind of a communal experience because you're going down with a bunch of people. So people were more patient.
I think so.
Perhaps that's what it is.
Do you like watching things from the past that have a slower pace like
Very
this?
Very much. I love television, especially from, like, say, the 60s. 60s up to maybe the mid-70s was a great time in television because me and Bronwyn got really hooked on a show called The Man from U.N.C.L.E. We really love it, with Robert Vaughn and David McCallum. We love that show. We love a lot of stuff, like, say...
What was that show about?
It was about a couple of spies who worked for an organization called U.N.C.L.E., which was United World Crime Law Enforcement or something. So that it was just a lot of fun. And like we watched like The Monkees and maybe, Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, Gilligan's Island, Hogan's Heroes, lots of great, My Favorite Martian, great shows. But also, the 90s were also a great time for television too. Not so much these days. It hasn't really been that great these days. The last great time of television was probably in the 90s. But anyway.
Do you remember, there's an Italian film director, I think his last name is Antonioni. Does he sound familiar at all to you? He made a lot of movies. Okay, I can't remember his first name, but he made a lot of movies, I guess, in the 60s. They were very stark, austere, black and white, of course. And
right, he directed Blow Up. He directed Zabriskie Point, I believe.
Yeah, Michelangelo
Antonioni. Yeah.
It was just interesting because his movies had there was very minimal dialogue. They were slow, but the visuals, to me, are what I found really compelling, what drew me in.
That's probably the one thing we have in film that separates us from any other literary form, is that it's really about the movement of the pictures. It's more about the editing. Editing is the one thing that films have over everything else.
Right. But I never found his movies boring. I always found that a lot of it was told just visually. Yeah.
And today's audiences would have no patience for that. This is a fun episode, and it highlights the urgency of quick, decisive thinking. Decker is way ahead of everybody else, and of course everybody else thinks he's not playing with a full deck. And he doesn't have both oars in the water, and, well, I think I made my point. Kenneth Haig, who is Decker in it, he bears a striking resemblance to Peter Sellers. That's what he reminds me of the most. Now, according to Wikipedia, he played the central role of Jimmy Porter in the very first production of John Osborne's seminal play, Look Back in Anger, in 1956. His performance in a 1958 Broadway theater production of the play, according to Wikipedia, and an anecdote here, it so moved one young woman in the audience that she got on the stage and slapped him in mid-performance. That's how good he was.
No.
I'd be like, excuse me, I'm trying to perform here, and you just slap me in the face. Oh, I get it. You really did. No, sweetie. You have to understand, I'm an actor. I'm playing a part. You don't have to hit me.
Anyway. My gosh.
So, The Last Flight was a radio production for Twilight Zone radio production, starring Charles Shaughnessy. Now, final thoughts on the episode. What did you think?
Final thoughts, I liked it. I thought the acting was pretty good. Decker was good. He was the main guy, right? That was his name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Terry. Terry Decker was good. I liked the story itself. I thought it was interesting. I just thought maybe at some points it could have been tightened up a little. There were a lot of long, kind of drawn out monologues, or there was at least one sequence that went on for like 5 minutes, and I felt myself drifting out of it a little bit.
Right.
But overall, good show.
Next time, I will be discussing the Purple Testament and Elegy with my good buddy Colin Hall on that Twilighty Zone about that zone. That Twilighty... okay.
You can't even say your own name.
No. See, the problem is that I have let all my other guests spook me. All of my guests spook me on the title of this show, and I keep messing up. That Twilighty show about that zone. Thanks for tuning in, and please, if you or somebody you know or love has a gambling problem, please contact the National Council on Problem Gambling at 1-800-522-4700. You'll be glad you did. I want to thank my guest here, Alex Saltz. He looks like you.
Thank you. I kind of have to use the bathroom.
So how about that? My first ever public service message. Good night.
Good night.